The dropship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of Karis 9. Sergeant Elena Vasquez gripped the safety harness across her chest and watched the other soldiers around her. Some looked excited. Others looked scared. Most just looked tired. She had seen that look before. It was the look of people who knew they were considered expendable. 30 seconds to landing. The pilot's voice crackled through the comm system. Elena checked her rifle one more time. The weapon felt solid in her hands. Real. Everything else about this mission felt wrong. They had been given 3 days of briefing for a planet that required 3 months of preparation. The intelligence reports were incomplete. The terrain maps had huge blank sections marked unknown. And the coalition commanders, those tall bird-like Kikshari and the floating jellyfish Veln, had dismissed every concern the human officers raised. "You are from Earth," Commander Kixtal had said, his feathers ruffling with what might have been amusement. "Earth is itself a dangerous world. You will adapt." The dropship slammed into the ground harder than it should have. Elena's teeth rattled. Around her, soldiers grunted and cursed. The rear ramp began to lower and light flooded into the dark interior. "Move out. Establish perimeter." Lieutenant Chen's voice cut through the noise. Elena unbuckled and grabbed her pack. It weighed 40 kilos, loaded with supplies for 2 weeks. She ran down the ramp with her unit, boots hitting alien soil for the first time. The air hit her like a wet blanket. Hot, humid, heavy. Her helmet's filter kicked in immediately, scrubbing out the toxic compounds that the briefing had mentioned. Around her, 12,000 human soldiers poured out of 200 dropships, spreading across what the maps called Landing Zone Alpha. Elena looked around. They were in a valley surrounded by dark purple vegetation that looked like a cross between trees and coral. The sky was orange and 2 small moons were visible even in daylight. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth against the horizon. "Vasquez, get your squad on the east perimeter." Lieutenant Chen pointed toward a line of the purple trees. "Yes, sir." Elena ran toward the tree line with her 8 squad members following. Behind them, the sounds of the deployment continued. Vehicles rolled out of cargo ships. Engineers began setting up the command post. Somewhere, someone was shouting orders in 3 different languages. By nightfall, Landing Zone Alpha looked like a small fortress. Defensive walls made of folded metal plates surrounded the camp. Guard towers stood at each corner. Lights blazed against the darkness. Inside the perimeter, 12,000 soldiers tried to settle in for their first night on Karis 9. Elena sat with her squad around a small heating unit, eating rations that tasted like cardboard. Private Mills, the youngest member of her squad, kept looking at the dark jungle beyond the lights. "You see something, Mills?" Elena asked. "I don't know, Sergeant. I keep thinking I see movement out there. It's an alien planet." "There's going to be wildlife," and Corporal Davis spoke up. He was older, a veteran of the Mars campaigns. "Just stay alert." "Did you hear what they're calling this place back on the command channel?" Private Okonkwo said quietly. "Class 7 Deathworld. Do you know how rare those are? There are only 15 known Class 7 worlds in the entire galaxy, and no species has ever successfully colonized one. Then why are we here?" Mills asked. Elena knew the answer, but she let Davis say it. "Because humans are cheap. Because we breed fast. Because if we all die, the Coalition has millions more where we came from." The words hung in the air. No one contradicted him because everyone knew it was true. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition 30 years ago. They were the newest members, the least respected, the most expendable. When the Coalition needed soldiers for dangerous missions, they asked humans. "Get some sleep," Elena said finally. "We have patrol duty at 0400, but sleep did not come easy." Elena lay in her tent, listening to the sounds of the alien world outside. There were calls in the distance that sounded like birds if birds could scream. There were rustling sounds in the undergrowth beyond the walls. And once around midnight, there was a roar that shook the ground and made every soldier in the camp reach for their weapons. The first casualty happened at dawn. Private Torres from Delta Company had gotten up early to use the latrine facilities at the edge of camp. He walked past the defensive wall to the designated area. 3 minutes later, someone heard screaming. By the time the response team arrived, Torres was gone. All they found was his rifle, his helmet, and a trail of blood leading into the jungle. The blood disappeared after 20 meters as if something had carried Torres into the trees. The search party that went after him found nothing. Not a body. Not a trace. Just more blood and some tracks that looked like they were made by something with 6 legs and claws the size of knives. Elena stood at the briefing that morning with the other squad leaders. The mood was grim. Commander Vreshenal, one of the Veln advisors, floated at the front of the room. Its translucent body pulsed with colored lights that translated into speech. "One casualty is acceptable," it said. "Do not venture beyond the defensive perimeter alone. Work in groups. Stay alert. We will establish mining operations today and begin extraction of the required minerals." "What took Torres?" someone asked, unknown. "The planet's fauna has not been fully catalogued." "Avoid unnecessary risk, that was it." No moment of silence. No investigation. One human was dead and the Coalition barely noticed. Elena felt anger burning in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. Getting angry would not help Torres. It would not help anyone. The day passed in tense activity. Elena's squad was assigned to security detail for a mining team. They walked 2 kilometers from the camp to a cliff face where sensors had detected high concentrations of the minerals the Coalition wanted. The journey was quiet, too quiet. The jungle around them was dense with the purple vegetation, and Elena could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. At the mining site, the engineers set up their equipment and began drilling into the rock. Elena positioned her squad in a defensive circle, watching the tree line. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. The only noise was the whine of the drills. "This doesn't feel right," Corporal Davis said quietly, standing next to Elena. "I know," she replied. The feeling of being watched grew stronger as the day went on. By the time they returned to camp that evening, Elena's shoulders were tight with tension. Back at Landing Zone Alpha, she learned that 2 more soldiers had disappeared. Both had been on patrol at different sections of the perimeter. Both had vanished without a trace. That night, Elena volunteered for guard duty. She stood on the wall looking out at the dark jungle and tried to see what was hiding out there. The darkness seemed to press against the lights of the camp like something alive. In the distance, those terrible roars echoed again, closer than before. Beside her, Private Okonkwo spoke quietly. "We shouldn't be here, Sergeant." "But we are," Elena said. "So we make the best of it. We stay sharp. We watch each other's backs. We survive, and if we can't..." Elena did not answer. She did not have an answer. She just kept watching the darkness, her rifle ready, counting down the hours until dawn. Somewhere in the jungle, something howled. Something else answered. And Elena knew, with a certainty that made her blood run cold, that the real nightmare had not even begun yet. The 3rd day on Karis 9 began with disaster. Elena woke to the sound of alarms blaring across the camp. She grabbed her rifle and ran outside her tent. Other soldiers were doing the same, confusion and fear on their faces. Through the camp's speakers, a voice was shouting about the communication satellites. "All orbital comms are down. Repeat, all satellite communications are offline." Lieutenant Chen found Elena within minutes. His face was pale. "Vasquez, get your squad to the command post. Something's wrong with the satellites." At the command post, chaos reigned. Officers shouted at technicians. Technicians stared at dead screens. The Coalition advisors floated and paced, their alien features showing what Elena had learned to recognize as distress. "What happened?" Elena asked Davis, who had arrived before her. "Electromagnetic storm," he said. "Came out of nowhere. Fried every satellite in orbit. We're blind. No way to call for help. No way to get evacuated." Elena felt her stomach drop. They were alone. 12,000 humans on a death world with no way to contact the outside galaxy. The situation got worse quickly. By midday, reports started coming in from the perimeter. The wildlife was getting bolder. Something had attacked the southern guard post, killing 3 soldiers before retreating. The bodies had been torn apart. At the northern mining operation, engineers reported seeing massive shapes moving through the jungle, circling their position. Elena's squad was sent to reinforce the eastern perimeter. When they arrived, she saw what had everyone spooked. The purple vegetation had moved. The tree line was closer to the camp than it had been yesterday. Not by much, maybe 10 meters, but enough to notice. "Trees don't move," Mills said, his voice shaking. "These ones do." Davis replied. "This whole planet is wrong." At 1500 hours, the first major attack came. Elena was checking defensive positions when she heard the screaming. It came from the supply depot near the center of camp. She ran toward the sound with her squad behind her. What she saw made her blood freeze. Creatures were pouring out of the ground. They looked like huge centipedes. each one 3 meters long with armored segments and mandibles that dripped with green liquid. There were dozens of them. They had tunneled up from beneath the camp and were attacking anything that moved. "Open fire!" Elena shouted. Her squad started shooting. The creature's armor was tough, but concentrated fire brought them down. Around the camp, other units were engaging the burrowing creatures. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, 47 soldiers were dead and hundreds more were injured. The green liquid from the creature's mandibles turned out to be a powerful acid that ate through skin and body armor. The medical tent overflowed with wounded. Elena helped carry injured soldiers, and what she saw horrified her. The acid wounds were not healing properly. They kept spreading, eating deeper into flesh. The medics had nothing that could stop it. That night, Colonel Marks, the highest-ranking human officer, called an assembly. He stood on a platform in the center of camp, looking tired and old. The 12,000 soldiers who had landed 3 days ago had been reduced to 11,400. And the number kept dropping as wounded soldiers died from their injuries. "I will not lie to you," Colonel Marks said. His voice carried across the silent camp. "We are in serious trouble. Our communications are gone. Our supplies will last 4 months if we ration carefully. The planet is more hostile than anyone predicted, and the coalition cannot hear our distress calls." He paused, looking at the faces of his soldiers. "But we are human. We are survivors. Earth is a death world too, though the galaxy doesn't classify it that way. We evolved fighting predators, surviving diseases, enduring disasters. We will not give up. We will not surrender. We will survive until help arrives." The speech was meant to inspire, but Elena saw the truth in the eyes around her. They were abandoned. The coalition would not risk ships to rescue expendable humans. They were on their own. The 4th day brought a new nightmare. Private Okonkwo woke up screaming. His skin had turned gray and hard in patches. The medics examined him and found spores growing under his skin, fungal spores from the planet. They were eating him from the inside out, replacing his tissue with their own. He was not the only one. By evening, 40 soldiers showed signs of infection. The fungus spread through contact with the purple vegetation. Anyone who had touched the alien plants without gloves was at risk. The medics tried everything, but nothing stopped the fungus. The infected soldiers were quarantined, placed in a separate section of camp, isolated from everyone else. Elena visited Okonkwo in quarantine. He lay on a cot, his skin now more gray than brown. His eyes were clear, though, and he smiled when he saw her. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "this planet really doesn't want us here, does it?" "We'll find a cure," Elena said, though she did not believe it. "No, you won't, but that's okay. Just make sure my family knows I didn't die a coward," Elena promised. 2 days later, Okonkwo was dead. So were most of the others in quarantine. On the 5th day, the senior officers made a fatal mistake. Against the advice of the scouts, Colonel Marks ordered an expedition into a nearby cave system. The sensors showed massive mineral deposits inside. The coalition needed those minerals. They would push forward despite the dangers. Elena's squad was not assigned to the expedition, but she watched as 500 soldiers marched into the caves, led by Colonel Marks himself and several coalition advisors. They never came back. The caves collapsed. The entire mountainside came down in a roar of rock and dust. Later, survivors from the edges of the formation reported seeing massive creatures inside the caves. Things with too many legs and eyes that glowed in the dark. The creatures had triggered the collapse deliberately, crushing the human soldiers and their alien commanders. With Colonel Marks dead, command fell to Major Williams. She was younger, less experienced, but she made a crucial decision. She ordered all forces to pull back to Landing Zone Alpha. No more expeditions, no more mining operations. Survival was the only mission now. But even that was becoming impossible. The attacks grew more frequent. Every night something tested the defenses. The burrowing creatures came again. Flying things with wings like razors swept down from the sky. And always those massive shapes circled in the jungle just beyond the lights, waiting. The supplies began to run low faster than expected. The fungal infection had gotten into the food stores. Half the rations had to be destroyed. Water purification systems struggled to keep up with the toxic compounds in the local water. Equipment broke down and there were no replacement parts. Elena watched her squad shrink. Mills was killed by a flying creature on patrol. Another soldier from her unit died from the fungal infection. 2 more vanished during a supply run that went wrong. On the 10th day, Major Williams called a meeting of all remaining squad leaders. Elena counted heads. Where there had been over 100 squad leaders 10 days ago, now there were maybe 60. The losses were staggering. "We cannot hold this position," Williams said bluntly. "We are losing people faster than we can count. The planet is killing us. I am making the decision to split into smaller groups. We will scatter into the jungle, find defensible positions, and wait for rescue." "Splitting up will make us weaker," someone argued. "Staying together makes us a target," Williams countered. "And our supplies cannot support this many people for long. Smaller groups can move faster, hide better, survive longer." Elena hated the plan, but she understood it. They had no good options left. Only choices between bad and worse. That night, Elena sat with what remained of her squad. Corporal Davis, Private Chen, Private Kowalski, and Private Zhao. 5 people left from the original 9. "If we're scattering, I want you all with me," Elena said. "We stay together. We watch each other. We survive." "Where do we go?" Chen asked. Elena pulled out her datapad. She had been studying the maps, incomplete as they were. "There are cave systems to the northeast." "Not the ones that collapsed. Different ones. If we can reach them, we can shelter. Maybe find a way to signal for help." "That's 40 kilometers through hostile territory," Davis said. "Do you have a better idea?" No one did. They would leave with the others when the camp scattered. They would make for the caves. And they would survive because the alternative was unthinkable. On the morning of the 11th day, Landing Zone Alpha was abandoned. 10,000 soldiers split into groups of 20 to 50 and disappeared into the alien jungle. Elena led her small group northeast, carrying everything they could on their backs. Behind them, the camp stood empty. Already the purple vegetation was creeping back in, reclaiming the space that humans had briefly occupied. Within a week, there would be no sign that anyone had ever been there at all. 3 weeks after Landing Zone Alpha was abandoned, Elena's group had been reduced from 47 survivors to 12. They had made it to the cave systems, but the journey had been brutal. The jungle fought them every step of the way. Predators picked them off during rest stops. The acid rain that fell without warning dissolved equipment and flesh. Plants that looked harmless released clouds of spores that caused hallucinations and respiratory failure. Elena sat at the entrance of their cave hideout, staring at her hands. They were scarred and calloused now, barely recognizable as the hands that had gripped a rifle on the dropship 3 weeks ago. She felt old, ancient, like she had lived 100 years on this terrible planet. "Sergeant, you need to see this." Corporal Davis stood deeper in the cave, holding a light stick. Elena got up and followed him through the narrow passages. They had been exploring the caves during the day, mapping safe routes and looking for water sources. The cave system was massive, extending kilometers underground. Davis led her to a chamber they had not explored before. Elena stepped inside and stopped. Her light stick illuminated walls covered in markings. They were not natural formations. They were carvings, deliberate, artistic, made by intelligent hands. "Someone lived here," Davis said quietly. "A long time ago." Elena moved closer to the walls. The carvings showed figures. They were not human, but they were clearly people. They showed buildings, cities, ships in the sky. And then the carvings changed. They showed destruction. They showed the figures fleeing. They showed the cities being swallowed by the purple vegetation. "This planet was inhabited," Elena said, her voice echoing in the chamber, "and something wiped them out." "Or they couldn't handle it," Davis replied. "Just like us." Elena touched the wall, feeling the ancient marks under her fingers. They left a warning. They wanted whoever came next to know what happened here. A lot of good it does us. Elena turned away from the carvings. Davis was right. Knowing that another civilization had failed did not help them survive. But it did confirm what she had suspected. Karis 9 was not just dangerous. It was actively hostile to colonization. The planet did not want visitors. Back at their main chamber, Elena found the group in trouble. Private Zhao had collapsed. Her skin burned with fever. The medic, a woman named Sullivan, was examining her. "It's the fungal infection," Sullivan said grimly. "She must have gotten exposed to spores. I can slow it down, but I can't stop it." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. Zhao was strong, smart, a good soldier, but this planet did not care about any of that. "How long?" Elena asked. "Days. Maybe a week if she's lucky." Zhao opened her eyes. They were bloodshot but aware. Don't waste resources on me, Sergeant. Save them for people who can still make it. We don't leave people behind, Elena said firmly. But over the next 3 days, 4 more people showed signs of infection. The fungus was in the air, in the water, in everything. Sullivan did what she could, but her medical supplies were nearly gone. On the 4th day, Zhao died. The others followed soon after. They buried the bodies in a deep chamber, sealing it with rocks. Elena stood at the makeshift grave and felt something shift in her. She had been trying to save everyone, but she could not. The planet was too strong. She needed to accept that if she wanted to survive, sacrifices would have to be made. The 12 became 8, then 6, then 5. Private Chen was killed by a pack of the 6-legged predators that hunted in the caves. He had been standing guard and made the mistake of wandering too far from the light. They found his body torn apart. Sullivan died from exhaustion and malnutrition. She had been giving most of her rations to the infected, trying to keep them alive. Her body just gave out. Elena sat with the remaining 4 survivors: Davis, Private Kowalski, Private Martinez from another squad, and Sergeant Hale, a quiet man who had joined them after his group was wiped out. We can't stay here, Elena said. The supplies are gone. The water is toxic. We need to move. Move where? Hale asked. His voice was flat, empty. Elena recognized the sound of someone who had given up hope. Elena pulled out her data pad. She had been studying it every night, making notes, trying to piece together a plan. The Coalition established an emergency evacuation beacon at the planet's north pole. It was supposed to be a backup extraction point. If we can reach it, we might be able to activate it. That's over 2,000 kilometers from here, Davis said, through some of the worst terrain on the planet. Do you want to stay here and die slowly? Elena challenged. Because that's the only other option. The group was silent. Then Kowalski spoke up. I'm with the sergeant. I'd rather die trying than die waiting. One by one, the others agreed. Even Hale, though his eyes remained dead. They left the caves the next morning. Each person carried only essential supplies. Food for 2 weeks, water purification tablets, weapons, the data pad with the maps. Everything else was left behind. The journey north was hell. They crossed swamps where the ground itself tried to swallow them. The acid water burned through their boots, forcing them to bind their feet with cloth torn from their uniforms. Things moved in the murky water, things with too many teeth and too many eyes. Martinez was pulled under by something they never saw. One moment he was beside Elena, the next he was gone. The water where he disappeared turned red, then green, then still. They did not stop to search for him. There was no point. The swamps gave way to forests. But these forests were worse than the jungle around Landing Zone Alpha. The trees here were carnivorous. Elena watched as Kowalski walked too close to a trunk. Vines shot out, wrapping around his leg. He screamed as the vines pulled him toward a mouth-like opening in the tree. Elena and Davis cut him free, but not before the tree's digestive acids had started dissolving his leg. They bandaged the wound, but Elena knew he could not continue. The leg was ruined and infection would set in. Kowalski knew it too. That night he took Elena aside. Leave me, he said. I'm slowing you down. You need to move fast. I'm not leaving you to die alone, Elena said. Then you'll die with me, and this whole nightmare will be for nothing. Kowalski gripped her arm. His eyes were clear and determined. Someone needs to make it back. Someone needs to tell Earth what happened here. That has to be you, Sergeant. You're the strongest. You're the smartest. You'll survive, Elena wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. The planet had taught her brutal lessons about survival. Sometimes the living had to abandon the dying. She left him supplies and one weapon. In the morning, she, Davis, and Hale moved on. That night, they heard a single gunshot in the distance. Kowalski had chosen his own end. The 3 survivors pushed north. They crossed crystal deserts where the sun reflected off mineral formations with blinding intensity. Sandstorms appeared without warning, winds carrying glass-sharp particles that shredded exposed skin. They learned to dig shallow pits and cover themselves when they saw the storms coming. Hale died in one of those storms. He had been standing watch while Elena and Davis rested. The storm hit faster than expected. By the time they dug out, Hale was gone. They found his body half buried in the sand, his face mask torn away, his lungs filled with crystal dust. 2 left, just Elena and Davis. They walked for days without speaking. There was nothing left to say. They were ghosts moving through an alien hell, driven by nothing but stubborn refusal to die. Then they reached the volcanic region. The ground shook constantly. Geysers of superheated steam erupted without warning. Rivers of lava crisscrossed the landscape. The air was so hot that their filters struggled to keep up. They rationed water carefully, knowing that dehydration would kill them as surely as any predator. Davis started coughing on the 5th day in the volcanic zone. By the 7th day, his lungs were failing. The volcanic ash had gotten past his filter. It was shredding his respiratory system from the inside. "How far?" he asked Elena one night, struggling to breathe. Elena checked the datapad. 300 kilometers. Maybe less. Davis laughed, but it turned into a coughing fit. Blood flecked his lips. "I'm not going to make it, Vas." Elena did not answer. She knew he was right. "Promise me something," Davis said. "When you get back, when you make it home, tell them we weren't cowards. Tell them we fought, I promise." The next morning, Davis could not stand. His lungs were too damaged. He could barely breathe. Elena sat with him, holding his hand until he stopped breathing. She buried him under rocks. She marked the spot on her datapad. Then she stood, adjusted her pack, and started walking north. Alone. Elena Vasquez, the last survivor of the Terran 47th Expeditionary Force, walked toward the pole. Her body was broken. Her mind was exhausted. But she carried something more important than her own life. She carried the memory of 12,000 soldiers. She carried proof of what had happened, and she carried humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender, even to a planet that seemed designed to kill everything that landed on it. 300 kilometers to go. She would make it. She had to, because Davis was right. Someone needed to tell the story, and that someone was her. Elena walked alone through hell, and hell changed her. The first week alone nearly broke her. She had always been strong, always been a leader, but leadership required people to lead. Alone, she was just a small human on a planet that wanted her dead. She talked to herself to fight the silence. She talked to Davis, to Zhao, to Okonkwo, to all the ghosts that followed her. "Still walking, Corporal," she said to the empty air. 300 kilometers to go. Then 299. Then 298. The datapad became her lifeline. Every night she recorded observations. She documented the creatures she saw. She mapped the terrain. She noted patterns in the planet's behavior. If she died, maybe someone would find the datapad. Maybe her death would mean something. But she did not plan to die. The volcanic region stretched on forever. Elena learned to read the ground, to spot the areas where the crust was thin and magma flowed beneath. She learned to predict the geysers by watching the steam patterns. She learned to move at night when the heat was less intense, to rest during the day in whatever shade she could find. She ran out of water purification tablets. For a day, she thought that would be the end. Then she found a solution. She collected steam from the geysers in her canteen. The heat killed most contaminants. It was not perfect, but it kept her alive. Food ran out next. The rations were gone. Elena was left with a choice: starve or eat what the planet provided. She chose to eat. The first time was the hardest. She trapped a small creature near a lava pool. It looked like a lizard with too many legs and scales that glowed red. She cooked it over volcanic heat and forced herself to eat. The meat tasted like sulfur and burned her throat going down. She vomited it up an hour later, but she tried again. And again. Her body slowly adapted. The meat stayed down. She learned which creatures were less toxic. She learned to cook them longer, to burn out the worst chemicals. She learned to survive on what the planet offered, even though every meal felt like swallowing poison. Strange things began happening to her body. Her skin darkened and toughened. Scars that should have taken weeks to heal closed in days. She fell into a crevasse and broke her arm. She set it herself, binding it with scrap metal. The bone knitted faster than it should have. Within 2 weeks, she could use the arm again. She did not understand what was happening, but she accepted it. The planet was changing her, adapting her, making her into something that could survive here. Part of her was horrified. Part of her was grateful. She crossed out of the volcanic region after 3 weeks. Ahead lay mountains, real mountains, huge and jagged, their peaks lost in toxic clouds. The evacuation beacon was on the other side. 200 kilometers. She could make it. The mountains tried to kill her a dozen different ways. The slopes were covered in ice that was not water ice. It was frozen atmosphere, compressed and solidified. It was slick as glass and sharp as razors. Elena climbed carefully, using her knife as an ice pick. her boots barely finding purchase. She fell twice. The first time she caught herself after sliding only 10 meters. The second time, she fell 50 meters and slammed into a ledge that should have killed her. But her toughened body absorbed the impact. She lay there, bones screaming, but nothing broken. After 10 minutes, she got up and kept climbing. The creatures in the mountains were different from the lowlands. They were ambush predators, hiding in crevasses and under ice shelves. Elena learned to probe the ground ahead with her rifle barrel. Several times she barely avoided things that exploded from hiding, all claws and teeth and hunger. One creature got her. She was resting on a ledge when it struck from above. It looked like a white spider the size of a motorcycle. Its mandibles pierced her shoulder before she could react. Pain exploded through her body, but Elena did not panic. She could not afford panic. She drew her knife with her good arm and stabbed it into the creature's eye cluster. The creature shrieked and released her. Elena stabbed again and again until the creature fell off the ledge and tumbled into the abyss below. Elena looked at her shoulder. The wound was deep. Poison from the mandibles was spreading through her tissue, turning the flesh black. This was how she would die. Alone on a mountain, poisoned by an alien spider, but she did not die. Her body fought the poison. She could feel it, like a war being waged under her skin. The infected tissue burned, then healed, then scarred. It took 3 days. 3 days of fever and pain and hallucinations, but she survived. And when it was over, she was stronger. Her body had learned to fight the planet's toxins. Elena stood on top of the mountain range and looked north. Below was a valley. Beyond the valley was a plateau, and on that plateau, according to her datapad, was the evacuation beacon, 100 kilometers. She started down the mountain. Her legs were strong despite the months of travel. Her mind was clear despite the isolation. She was no longer the sergeant who had landed on Karis 9. She was something new, something adapted, something that could survive. The valley was a nightmare of carnivorous plants. They grew in dense thickets, their leaves razor-sharp, their roots mobile and seeking. Elena watched as small creatures were caught, dragged underground, and dissolved. She needed to cross 3 kilometers of this to reach the plateau. She studied the problem like an engineer, because that was what she was before this planet stripped everything away and remade her. She was an engineer who solved problems. She used fire. The plants burned, but they burned slow. Elena created a corridor of flame through the thicket, moving behind the fire as it cleared a path. The plants tried to grab her. Their roots whipped at her legs. But her body was tough now. The plants could not pierce her skin easily. She fought through, burning and cutting until she emerged on the other side. The plateau was close, so close. But one final obstacle remained, the apex predator of Karis 9. Elena saw it from a distance. It was massive, easily 20 meters long, walking on 6 legs thick as tree trunks. Its head was armored, its mouth filled with teeth like swords. It had the build of a tank and the grace of a hunting cat, and it was directly between Elena and the evacuation beacon. For 2 days, Elena watched the creature. She studied its patterns. It patrolled a territory that included the path to the beacon. It was intelligent. It marked its territory and defended it aggressively, and it was looking for threats. Elena could not fight it directly. Even with her adapted body, even with her weapons, it would tear her apart. She needed to outsmart it. She spent another day preparing. She gathered the most toxic plants she could find. She butchered smaller creatures and let them rot. She created a trap, using herself as bait. On the 3rd day, she walked into the apex predator's territory. It noticed her immediately. It roared, a sound that shook the ground and sent smaller creatures fleeing in terror. Then it charged. Elena ran. Not away from the beacon, but toward a canyon she had scouted. The creature followed, its massive feet pounding the earth. Elena's heart hammered, but she kept her head. She had done the calculations. She knew the timing. She reached the canyon edge and jumped. She fell 5 meters and landed hard on a ledge she had spotted earlier. Above her, the apex predator tried to stop, but it was too big, too fast. It skidded at the edge, claws scrambling for purchase. Elena threw her trap. The rotten meat, mixed with toxic plant extract, flew up and splattered across the creature's face. The creature reeled back, roaring in pain and fury. The toxins were burning its eyes, its mouth, its sensitive nose. Blinded and in pain, the creature lost its balance. It fell into the canyon with a thunderous crash. Elena did not wait to see if it survived. She climbed back up the other side and ran for the beacon. She found it on a bare patch of ground on the plateau. It was a metal structure, 10 meters tall, covered in ice and dust. The coalition symbol was etched on the side. Elena approached it like it was sacred. She activated her datapad and interfaced with the beacon's control panel. The power cells were old, but they still had charge. She input the emergency activation code. The beacon hummed to life. Lights flickered on. A transmission signal began broadcasting into space. Elena collapsed next to the beacon. She had made it. 2,000 kilometers of hell, and she had made it. She pulled out her datapad and made her final recording. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but the words were clear. "This is Sergeant Elena Vasquez, Terran 47th Expeditionary Force. I am the last survivor. 12,000 soldiers deployed to Keras 9. All dead except me. The planet is more hostile than anyone predicted. It fights colonization actively. The Coalition underestimated the danger and overestimated human expendability." She paused, gathering strength. "But they underestimated human adaptability, too. I survived because I learned. I adapted. I became something new. If the Coalition wants to colonize Deathworlds, they need to understand what humans can do. What we can become." She uploaded all her data to the beacon. Every recording. Every map. Every observation. 2,000 kilometers of lessons purchased with blood and sacrifice. Then she lay back and waited. The rescue would come, or it would not. But either way, she had won. She had survived. She had proven that humans could endure what no other species could. Elena closed her eyes and let herself rest for the first time in months. The wind blew across the plateau. The planet continued its eternal hostility. The rescue ship arrived 6 days after Elena activated the beacon. She was barely conscious when she heard the engines. The sound pulled her back from the edge of a dream where she was walking through an endless desert made of bones. She opened her eyes and saw a Coalition transport descending through the orange sky. For a moment, she thought it was another hallucination. The planet had given her many false hopes. But the ship was real. It landed 50 meters from the beacon and the ramp extended. Elena tried to stand. Her legs did not want to work. 8 months on Keras 9 had pushed her body beyond normal limits. She crawled toward the ship instead, dragging herself across the rocky ground. 2 figures emerged from the ship. They wore full environmental suits and carried medical equipment. Elena recognized them as Kikshari, the bird-like species that had dismissed human concerns before the deployment. They stopped when they saw her. "Identification," one of them said, his translator making the words flat and emotionless. Elena laughed. It came out as a harsh croak. "Sergeant Elena Vasquez, Terran 47th Expeditionary Force, service number 847-22-9461. The Kikshari consulted a datapad. His feathers ruffled in what Elena had learned meant surprise. "The deployment records show no survivors. The entire force was presumed lost." "Presumed correctly," Elena said. "I'm the only one left. They took her aboard the ship." The medical bay was clean and white, so different from the blood and dirt of Keras 9 that Elena felt like she had entered another dimension. They placed her in a quarantine pod, a transparent tube that sealed her away from the rest of the ship. "Contamination protocols," the medic explained. "We must ensure you carry no pathogens from the planet." Elena watched through the pod as the ship lifted off. Through the viewport, she saw Keras 9 falling away. The purple jungles, the volcanic wastes, the mountains. The planet that had killed 12,000 soldiers and failed to kill her. The journey to the nearest Coalition station took 3 weeks. Elena spent most of it in quarantine being studied. Teams of xenobiologists examined her like she was an alien specimen. They took samples of her blood, her tissue, her bone. They ran scans of her body and exclaimed in their various languages at what they found. "Her cellular structure has been altered," one Veln biologist reported. "The exposure to Keras 9's environment has triggered adaptive mutations. Her skin is 40% denser than baseline human. Her healing rate is accelerated by a factor of 3. Her immune system shows resistance to toxins that should be lethal." "Is she still human?" another asked. "Genetically, yes. But she has been upgraded, enhanced by survival pressure." "Fascinating." Elena listened to them talk about her like she was not there. She did not care. Let them study her. Let them learn. She had other priorities. "I need to speak to someone in command," she said. "I have data about Keras 9. Information that could save lives." The biologists ignored her. They were more interested in her biology than her report. But Elena was patient. She had learned patience from 8 months of survival. She could wait. They reached Coalition Station Primus, a massive orbital platform that served as a military hub. Elena was transferred to the medical complex, still in quarantine. Days passed. She grew stronger. Her body, no longer fighting for survival every moment, began to recover from the damage. The scars remained, but the pain faded. Finally, on the 10th day at the station, someone important came to see her. Commander Vreshenal, one of the original Coalition advisors who had accompanied the deployment. Elena remembered him. He had been one of the voices telling humans to stop complaining and follow orders. He floated outside her quarantine pod, his translucent body pulsing with colors. "Sergeant Vasquez," he said, "your survival is unexpected." "I'm full of surprises," Elena replied. "We have reviewed the data you transmitted from the beacon. It is quite comprehensive. However, the Coalition has decided to classify this information." Elena felt cold anger settle in her stomach. Classify it? 12,000 people died. The galaxy needs to know what happened. "The galaxy needs stability," Vreshenal said. "Knowledge of such a catastrophic failure would undermine confidence in Coalition military operations. The official report will state that the 47th Expeditionary Force was lost due to unforeseen circumstances. Your survival will be noted, but the details will remain restricted." "No," Elena said simply. Vreshenal's colors shifted to patterns that suggested confusion. "You do not have a choice in this matter." "You're right. I don't. Because I already sent copies of everything to human networks before you could lock it down." She had not, actually. But the bluff worked. Vreshenal's colors changed again, this time to patterns that suggested alarm. "You would not. Try me. I spent 8 months learning how to fight things scarier than Coalition politics. You want to bury the truth? I'll make sure every human in the galaxy knows what you did to us, how you sent us to die because we were expendable, how you didn't even try to rescue survivors." They stared at each other, the Velen advisor and the changed human. Finally, Vreshenal spoke. "What do you want?" "I want recognition for the 47th. I want their families to know they died fighting, not running. I want the truth about Karis 9 made public. And I want changes. Better intelligence, better preparation, better respect for human soldiers. That is a substantial list of demands. It's a small price for your silence about how badly you screwed up." Elena did not actually have leverage. She was one soldier against the entire Coalition. But she had learned on Karis 9 that sometimes survival meant bluffing, making yourself seem more dangerous than you were, and she had become very good at survival. Vreshenal left. Elena waited. 3 days later, she was released from quarantine, not to freedom, but to a conference room where she faced a panel of high-ranking Coalition officers from multiple species. For 6 hours, she gave her report. She showed them the recordings, the maps, the documentation of every death, every attack, every failure. She explained in simple terms how the Coalition's arrogance had killed 12,000 humans. "And yet you survived," one officer noted. "What made you different?" "I adapted," Elena said. "That's what humans do. We change, we learn, we become what we need to be to survive. You sent us to Karis 9 thinking we would fail. And most of us did, but I didn't. And neither will the next humans you send to a Deathworld if you actually train them properly." The panel dismissed her. She was assigned quarters on the station and told to wait while they made their decisions. Elena did not wait patiently. She contacted every human media outlet she could reach. She told her story. She named names. She made sure that the truth spread faster than the Coalition could contain it. The reaction was immediate. On Earth and human colonies across the galaxy, people were outraged. The Terran 47th had not been forgotten. They became martyrs, heroes, proof that humanity could endure what other species could not. The Coalition was forced to respond. They held a memorial service for the 47th. They upgraded the threat classification of Class 7 worlds. They implemented new protocols for Deathworld deployment, and they offered Elena Vasquez a choice. "You can return to Earth," Commander Vreshenal told her, "with full honors. A pension, recognition, you have earned rest. Or," Elena asked, "or you can help us train the next generation. Teach them what you learned. Create a specialized unit for Deathworld operations. The Coalition recognizes that human adaptability is a valuable resource. We wish to develop it properly." Elena thought about it. She thought about Earth, about green trees and blue skies and safety. She thought about never having to fight for her life again. It sounded wonderful. It sounded boring. I'll train them, she said, but on my terms. I choose the recruits. I design the program. And humans lead the unit, not coalition advisors. Agreed. 6 months later, Elena stood in a training facility on Luna, Earth's moon. Before her were 50 human soldiers, the best volunteers from across human space. They looked at her with a mixture of awe and fear. She had become something of a legend. The woman who survived Karis 9, the woman who changed. Listen up, Elena said, her voice carrying across the training ground. You volunteered for the Deathworld response unit. That means you're either brave or stupid. Probably both. I'm here to make sure that if you're sent to a planet like Karis 9, you come back alive. She walked along the line, studying each face. The coalition thinks humans are expendable. They're wrong. But we have to prove them wrong. We do that by being tougher, smarter, and more adaptable than any other species in the galaxy. We do that by surviving what nothing else can survive. She stopped and turned to face them all. I lost 12,000 soldiers on Karis 9. 12,000 people who trusted me, who fought beside me, who died because we weren't prepared. I will not lose any of you, not if you follow my training, not if you learn what I learned. She held up her scarred hands. I came back from a planet that wanted me dead. I came back changed, stronger, better. You will too. Because that's what humans do. We adapt, we survive, we win. The training began. It was brutal. Elena pushed them harder than any instructor in coalition history. She taught them to think like engineers, to see problems as puzzles. She taught them to eat alien food, to survive on minimal resources, to fight creatures that seemed impossible to kill. She taught them to become more than they were,